Well, hello, Leidy Klotz. Welcome back to the show. I'm so glad to have you back.
Thanks, Liz. It's awesome to be here. Thanks for having me again.
Of course, of course. I love your work. Obviously, Subtract was a big hit, your previous book. This new book, In a Good Place, was something that I read was like a 10-year process. What was the question? What was the issue that would not leave you alone? And so you had to create a book out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been interested in this intersection between like our physical world and our mental world, right? Like what's going on around us and what's going on in our heads and how that interacts. And like the last book, Subtract, was an example of that, where it's like, okay, why do we do this thing, which is like add to make our external world better? But this book is a result of like, okay, well, what's actually useful for people at that intersection of our mental and physical world? Like, what are we not thinking about that would actually be helpful for people? And so the 10-year process was really like a you know, looking at all the intersections, but also then like trying to distill it down to like, okay, well, what matters for people here, right? And I tell this story in the beginning of the book about going like me in the bookstore with my kids or even in the library with my kids, and it's like they were really little at the time, and so I would go and check out the psychology and it's like self-help stuff, and I'm like, all right, this is interesting, and then I would go back and check on them, and if they were doing okay, then I would like go look at the design stuff, right? And it's like what those worlds are split. I think there's a huge opportunity when we bring them together, but like what's the right way to do so, and how can that be helpful for people?
Yeah, and
Does
you're in
that make
such
sense?
Well, I think just to give the listeners some background about you, you're in such a
Yeah.
unique position because you are a professor of engineering, but then you also study psychology and write about psychology. So you really do have this perspective that most people don't, where you can bring those two worlds together. And why do you think we as society, especially in America, miss that fact of environment being a very powerful lever for positive change? We're always about, body and,
Yeah.
home
Mind or
improvement
yeah.
or, just, I don't know, just that mentality aspect of self-help. Why don't we ever just look around us as an option?
I think it's mostly well intentioned that we just like we try to like go into detail on things. I mean, and this even since the era of the great philosophers, it's like people like split up mind and matter to try to understand them both better. And I don't think anybody's like explicitly saying there's no connection between these two, but it's like, okay, to understand how our mind is working, we like study that in great depth, or if to get people tips about how to make their depression go away, we're like focused very much on like, well, what's happening in your brain? Because that's where the depression is, right? Um, and then we don't like look for the opportunities that are outside of that world, and the other way around, right? When my engineering colleagues and myself, like we're talking about the built environment and we're thinking about like, okay, how does this like prevent water from getting on people's heads? And like, how is it going to be nice lighting? But we're not talking about like, how is this meeting their psychological needs, which of course it does. So yeah.
Were there any lessons from Subtract that kind of creeped into this new book? I mean, as far as like maybe clutter or something like.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, one of I mean, the gist of Subtract is that we don't think about taking away to make things as a way to make the world around us better. And one of the reasons we don't do that is because it's easier to show competence or to show that we're like effectively interacting with the world when we add things. And I think that's one of the huge relationships that I talk about in in a good place, is that like this we have this urge to interact with the world around us. I mean, it's a deep psychological need, and we're not going to be fulfilled if we're not doing that. And yet, like so much of the modern, if you think about our hunter-gatherer ancestors, they had to do it, right? You would die if you don't figure out a way to like get shelter from the elements and, not get attacked by predators. So you have to like manipulate your world to make that happen. But we aren't necessarily forced to do it, which is good for the most part, but it's, then we're not like scratching this basic psychological itch that we have to interact with our surroundings, which makes us not feel as good.
Do you think there was a time where it started to devolve from like these communal spaces that we were all in and how we sought out others and how it was pretty much easy to do so to where we
Yeah,
do feel more isolated now?
I think so. I mean, certainly, again, it's like we're this is awesome that you and I are talking, right? Like in the virtual world and then like sharing with your audience. So there's like these great things that technology enables. You can you're looks like you're in your house. Like I mean, it's like but that takes away some of these just serendipitous interactions with people and with the world, like the larger like physical world, right? So we're probably going to less places. We're um, finding ourselves in less unfamiliar environments, which is like creates like a slight bit of discomfort, but it's also a great way to grow and realize like, oh, look, I went to this one street over on my walk and I realized I could do that too. So I'm feeling slightly better about myself.
Hmm.
And then also just in terms of the physical design, well, we have the capability to do it with much more certainty, right? I mean, I'm in an office right now that's like an old building at University of Virginia, and it's got a operable window, or it used to be an operable window, but now it's sealed shut because there's like
Ooh.
air conditioning, right? And so it's like I mean, it's a small thing, but that would be a way for me to interact with my surroundings is to open that window and get a breeze to come through. And now all of a sudden I feel more empowered in like making my world around me. So I think both in like you know, the screen type technology, but also just in the technology we have to like create more certainty in our surroundings. And then we kind of engineer out some of these growth opportunities.
Yeah. And talking about screens, like most
Oh
of my
gosh.
listeners are parents, and so
Hmm.
it's kind of unavoidable because the kids are in school and they've got tablets and it's just kind of part of life now.
Hmm.
How do you think that's affecting the kids and how they interact with their environment and with others?
I think, obviously we know that like the screens are there are detrimental effects to the screens, but then the question is like, what are you missing when you're not on the screens? And that's like the environment, right? How many times I mean, forget about our kids, but just ourselves, right? You're in a room and you have no idea like what your surroundings are because you're so immersed in the screen itself. And I get that the screen, again, it does useful things, but it's like two-dimensional. It's not, it doesn't smell like anything. The sound is not as good as the real world. There's no like sensory, like texture, or touch senses that you're working on there. And so like the screen is fundamentally incapable of like giving us the things that our physical environments can give us, right? And I was talking to somebody else about this, and their argument was like, yeah, well, the screens are so like satisfying. And it's like, yeah, but they're like satisfying in an addictive way, right? It's like
Hmm.
saying like we shouldn't try to not be an alcoholic because being an alcoholic is so like, addicting or gratifying. And it's like
Yeah,
a small hit of feeling good that eventually goes away and leaves you asking for something more. Whereas like the physical surroundings have the capability of a much like better, healthier relationship. So I think certainly the screens are taking us away from taking us away from that.
I totally agree. And it kind of reminded me, I'm reading my youngest, the Narnia books. And,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
when Edmund first meets the White Witch and she gives him these like enchanted Turkish delights. And so
Uh-huh.
he has one and he doesn't realize that it's making him eat more and more and more. And it's like all he can think about. And that
Right.
totally reminded me, like, that's how I feel like how screens are. It's like this enchanted thing that, releases dopamine predictably. And so you
Right.
always want it. But at the same time, it's not truly giving us what we need as human beings, which is other people and that environment and, just discovery and physicality. And I thought it was really interesting in the book too, how you talk about how other countries are dealing with this issue really in a smarter way. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So, I mean, if you just, and I know, well, yeah, like I go to Sweden in the summer, and that's if my job
Oh, do
already,
you? Oh.
as if my job wasn't already good enough, right? But it's like a study abroad class in southern
Mm.
Sweden, and I get it that like different, you can't just assume that just because one culture does something, it makes sense to do it here. But like the public spaces there are just immaculate and just like so thoughtful. And I actually talked to a designer over there, and he said, yeah, they have this like this saying of what is it? Private necessity and public luxury is one way that they like think about their spaces. And so the town that we're in is just a small university town, Lund, and it has this amazing like Central Park. And after school, everybody is just there because it's awesome. And there are like soccer fields, but there are self-serve zip lines. There are
Oh.
all sorts of like you can just get on the zip line, right? If we want to do that in the United States, it's like, okay, where's your credit card? You got to drive to jump,
Mhm.
and then you only the kids who can afford it can do it, and then you like sign a waiver, blah blah blah. And then these like really cool hiking paths. One of my favorites was like it was just everything was pruned at like 4 feet high, so it was like kid scale, so the kids could
Yeah.
just go through, and the parents it was like completely awkward to try to go through there. So the kids had a huge advantage and therefore loved it. But then, that's the big public square, but then or the public park. But then everywhere you look, just like there's these little nooks and crannies, and it's like, oh, there's a 4-on-4 soccer field that is like built to last for 100 years with walls, and there's kids using it. And there's a treehouse that like looks like the Robinson Crusoe thing at Disney
Mhm.
World, and it's just not even really on a map. It's just there. And so the amount of kind of attention paid to the public spaces was really stark comparison to what we have here. And also, it's like you see the benefit of that. People are out using it, and we talk about screens too, right? It's like now this is something better to do than to be on a screen. So it's not as if it's impossible.
What do you think is the holdup in America? Why are we so industrial here and it's just not prioritized or funded necessarily? Like you have to have a big community vote to even make something like this happen.
Yeah, obviously it's multifaceted, right? I mean, like zoning rules and like just the prioritization of development, right, at all costs and like profit in the development,
Hmm.
and as opposed to like finding ways to, I think all of us would acknowledge that there's a tremendous value to our kids having an amazing park to go to, and a lot of us would be like more than willing to pay our share for that. But it just yeah, the system is kind of working against it. I think, I mean, obviously, also Sweden has a higher tax rate, so there are some things that are like allowing them to do that. But yeah, and then you mentioned like the projects and trying to like get something done. It's like an act
Yeah.
of Congress just to get like your community to vote on, can we have like 3 more houses in this plot of land over here that was initially zoned for 2 houses, and everybody talks about that for 2 years. And
Yes.
so I think it's like one thing that was interesting, like writing the book and researching for it was this idea of like collective efficacy. So like all throughout history, there's like basically society gets built by doing things together, right? I mean, that's like what brings people together. And one of the first things that brought people together was like working on big building projects. And then there's all these, examples from cultures all over the world of basically like barn raisings, right? And or in Kenya, it's called Harambee, which is like building together, where it's, there are these traditions of doing a physical project together that, results in something that not one person couldn't have done alone, but it also bonds those people, right? Kind of how Habitat for Humanity works, right? It's the most successful charity and they build houses, but like so much of that experience is like people doing stuff together. And so when we talk about like doing larger scale projects, right? It's like, can you work together to do something small together? And then that builds the network, and then you're able to take on bigger projects. And, some of the things like the High Line in New York City, if listeners aren't familiar, I mean, it's just an abandoned railway line that was converted to an elevated walkway that's now like one of the most visited places in the world. And it was started by two people sitting together at a community meeting and then just kind of went from there. So it's not as if
Hmm.
it's impossible to do, but it does seem daunting sometimes. I think we feel like we don't have a say in the world around us, and part of it is just getting started,
Yeah.
like getting started ourselves and then realizing that we do have a say, and then that kind of hopefully keeps going.
Well, I love like having authors on the show to talk like that because you're planting seeds to everyone who's listening to this. They're like, oh, yeah, he's right. Maybe I could do this in my own community. I think that's such a great meta opportunity.
Hopefully. And I would
Oh
also,
yeah.
I mean, and just if they need more motivation, it's like we all think about like how do we like expand our influence, right? And, as an author, it's like, okay, I like come up with ideas and then share them, right? And that hopefully helps the world. But like one of the great ways that we can like put our ideas into the world is through physical spaces, right? So say you get a playground approved. Now all of a sudden you're signaling that your neighborhood cares about kids and that, that well done playgrounds are valued in your community. And that is just as, more powerful than a blog post, right? It's like this constant reminder that
Yeah.
this matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked a lot about, in the community, but what about in the home as well? For the mother listening
Yeah.
to this who
Yes. Yeah.
wants
Yeah.
to, create an environment where her family's more connected and it's more peaceful and just better
Yeah.
vibes. Like what are some small things she can do today?
Okay, well, I'm gonna delay on the what are the small things, but quick, I promise we'll get to it. The first thing is like filtering these like design choices that you make, even if you're not a designer, especially if you're not a designer, through the lens of like, is this giving me agency, give me and my family agency, which is just like feeling like they have a say in the space? Is this giving us growth and competence? And is this giving us kind of connection and belonging? And so often we just jump right to like, oh, I think this like backsplash is a cool color, right? And it's stylish and it's going to make my life so much better, which is fine, but that's like a third level decision compared to like, okay, agency, growth, and connection. And so, for agency, for example, that's just, you being able to choose what your space is and you actually doing it is actually a great way to experience agency. And so, it's the difference between like, how it feels when you're renting a place and you don't like the colors of the walls, but you're not allowed to paint the walls. Like that's very frustrating. So like kind of taking ownership and choosing what you want your space to be like. And when you find something that can't be changed, maybe you can't paint a wall or maybe you can't take a wall down, try to focus in areas where you do have agency, and that will make you enjoy the space more. But I think when
Mm,
it comes to kids, one thing that I've started doing since kind of writing the book is just giving my son like more opportunities to shape the space. So this is a trivial example in terms of the space itself, but we have like wooden stairs that are kind of slippery for especially for older people if they're coming down and they're pretty steep. So I'm like, okay, we're just gonna stick some of those carpet pads on there. And so we're gonna do it. So I asked my son, like, what color do you want? And, we looked at them together and he picked it out. I mean, I wouldn't have let him pick something that was ridiculous, but
mm.
he picked one that was fine. And then when they came and it's like we needed to stick them on, like I helped him like make a template so that you could, set it up and get them all stuck on there. And he was like really excited to do that, right? So it's like he's having agency, not just over his room, which is like great. That's really important for kids, obviously, but also over the larger space, right? And I think that's agency. The competence and growth, I think it's thinking about how our spaces evolve, right? And how we like learn from them. So it's like, how is this space going to to challenge me, right?
Hmm.
Or to make me experience new things. And that could be, paying attention to how it evolves through the seasons, for example, right? It's like, okay, I'm using my kitchen one way in the winter when it's like cold outside and you want to be away from the windows, but in the summer, I want to rearrange it in a different way so that I can, experience the natural light or whatever.
Yeah.
One of the examples in the book is my friends, the Lees. There was a period in their life where they had four kids under the age of six, and it was like two twins who were not well mannered. They're awesome, but they were like so much energy. And
Sounds
then
like
like,
boys.
yeah, sounds like boys. Yeah, twin boys, right? And these boys were hilarious. They're the boys who would go to like a tryout of 500 basketball players and then come back from the tryout and the parents ask like, how was it? And they're like, we were the best ones there, the best two. Like it was me. I'm not sure which one of us was better, but we were definitely the
I
best
would
two.
like them.
Yeah, they're awesome. Um, And then two little daughters, and so I mean, their life is as crazy as you could think. And I saw them that summer, and I was like, "What? Hi, how's life, Jimmy?" That's the dad's name, and he's like, "Oh, it's good. We started eating outside." I was like, "What do you mean? Like you like cook out sometimes?" He's like, "No, everything outside. We just moved the kitchen outside or the dining
Mm,
area outside." And he's like, the food falls off the table. Me and Katie don't even care. And the once the kids are done with dinner, we don't care if they get up from their seat and go play because now they're outside and doing something. And it's like so much quieter because when they yell, it doesn't like bounce off the walls. And again,
hmm
that's like they had access to that space. They always had access to that space. And how many of us have like some space that we could be using for something that we just haven't even considered, and it would kind of help us grow in our lives and in how we use the space. So that's an example of growth. And then connection is, I mean, that's a huge one. That probably ties pretty closely to subtract. I think one of the general themes when we think about like connecting in a space is it's hard to connect with another person, right? I mean, that like takes all of your attention to do
Yeah.
that. And so if the space is distracting in any way, that's like kind of taking away from the connection. So I've been thinking like when I
hmm
just like, okay, I I don't even think about how I come into my house, right? And I don't even like notice anything. But now, like if I go, okay, I'm going to start at my front door and then walk in and be like, okay, what are people noticing when they come in here? And I'm like, oh my God, there's like shin guards there. There's like boxer briefs thrown on the floor, and it's like how distracting.
Oh.
Yeah, but the thing about the person is not like, I mean, they're probably just like, oh yeah, he's got a messy kid, but then, but then but then they're not thinking about like, okay, like how they're not comfortable. How are we going to connect? So like decluttering both just the way grandma told you, but um also like the busyness of the designs and things, right? And
hmm
I mean, there's certainly places where you want to put like a statement piece that's going to be what everybody looks at and focuses on, but also acknowledge that if like everybody's focusing on that statement piece, it's going to be harder to make that initial connection.
That's so
So,
interesting. I've never thought about it like that.
yeah. What are some do those tips make sense? I know you asked for tips, so I want to make sure that I gave them.
No, 1000%. And I love how you
Okay.
broke it down because it does make even more sense when you see that there's sections to each to create this whole feeling of, I feel peaceful. I feel like I've got my life together. I feel
Right.
like I'm happy.
Right. Right. And I guess my hope would be, and I know that people can meet those needs in different ways. Um, but yeah, I think we just get so much farther towards spaces that make us happy if we started with those needs and yeah.
So how is that different than like the home improvement craze? Because I know you mentioned in the book like we're obsessed with home improvement and got a million shows on it, but this seems like it's more nuanced than I'm just going to change the kitchen.
Yeah, I mean, there's a fun theory I have that is like, part of the reason for the home improvement craze is just because of how innate this desire is, right? It's like so when
Mm,
you're watching House Hunters or Property Brothers or whatever like the latest one is, you're like scratching that itch to interact with your environment, but of course it's only like happening on the screen. I don't know if your kids watch those. Have you seen those videos where like people are building stuff in a jungle and it's like oh
yes,
my God.
yeah,
And
that's
those like are
awesome.
those are fascinating, right? I mean, and so
hmm
like, it's just like people like building how yeah, without any like modern tools and making amazing stuff and you just be like transfixed for out like hours on YouTube watching that. So I think part of that is like tapping into our desire to shape our surroundings. But then so much of it is kind of superficial, right? It's like you're going to be happy if buy this house instead of this other house, right? Or you're going to like this because it has the nice kitchen island and it's set up better for your life. And again, all those things matter, but I think they're skipping past like the agency, growth,
Right.
and connection in most cases.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think too, if you're still like, well, I don't really get it, just go back to the carpet on the stairs analogy, and how he got
Yeah,
to
for
choose
the
it and
kids.
then even install it.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, I mean, this is like it's fascinating how interwoven space is with these other things that we learn. So one of my favorite stories of my daughter, I mean, they learn about their personal space, right? And so when she went to preschool, like one of the first things that she learned was that if like the playroom's getting too chaotic, you can yell space, and then everybody has an agreement that they're supposed to like give you a 10-foot circle
I
around
love
you,
that.
right? Yeah, yeah. But so like I'd be walking through our house and she's sitting there playing and I'm just like trying to like do laundry or something and she's like space and she's like just like basically telling me that I have to like walk around her 10-foot circle to do the laundry. And I'm like, all right, Josie, can I like walk over here? And she's like, yeah, but you like you can't look at me. So it's like, but the reason they learn that, right, is like we talk so much about boundaries, right? And like, but learning those physical boundaries is like really essential for them learning their personal and emotional boundaries, right?
Mm,
It's like, this is me, this is you, this is, you can have your feelings, but I have my feelings over here. I'm an independent person. Um, and, that actually is like totally interwoven in our brains where like this how we think about space and what the brain networks that we've used to kind of navigate space are the ones that then get adapted as we navigate like personal relationships, right? You think about
ah,
being close to somebody or distant from somebody. I mean, those are spatial terms, right? And
mm.
so it's really deeply connected. And so, back to the agency, right? It's like that was a fun story of a little kid, but also, the same way a teenager has their own room, right? And now they have like more control in that space. They are learning that's not just about physical, that's also about like them gaining independence and figuring out how to yeah, do things on their own slightly, with us still doing the laundry probably.
Well, apparently not. It's on the floor in your
Yeah,
entryway.
I do it eventually. Yeah, good callback.
Greatest
Yeah.
takeaway. Oh my God, I love it. Okay, oh my gosh, we're almost to the end of time, but I do have some rapid fire questions for you if you're ready.
Okay. Yeah, go. I'll try to answer them fast. I've been the one talking too much. So.
No, of course you are. You're the guest. Okay. One room in your own home that most shapes your thinking and why?
Oh, good question. I would say my kitchen, and that's like because like I have a study where I do work. I also sometimes sit in a chair in another room and do work. But I think when my thinking gets shaped most when I'm like doing something else. And so
Hmm.
like often when I like just get up to clean the kitchen or to cook dinner, I'll like process something that happened that I've been working on in one of the other rooms, but I process it differently because I'm moving and not like deliberately attending to it.
I get
Great
that.
question.
Okay. What's one small change that makes a very big difference?
Small change that makes a big difference. Anything that somebody that's really visible. So this isn't a small change, but like there's a classic study of solar panels that shows that when people who can see solar panels from their house are more likely to have solar panels on their own house and they control for everything else. And so it's just like
Hmm.
seeing that this is a thing that can happen in the world makes other people more likely to do it. So like I would just say anything you do that is visible to other people is going to have reverberations that could be positive or could be negative beyond your own household.
So you're saying I should keep posting when I go to the gym, then showing people that.
Well, no, this is like, yeah, that's exactly it though, right? Like when you post when you go to
No.
the gym, that's like a social norm, right? And we have to like when we get those stickers when we vote. And the reason for that is because like,
Hmm.
okay, now people know that you voted and more people are going to be likely to vote. Um, but when it's the world, with the physical world, like the thing just stays there. Like you
Yeah.
don't have to do the posting because there's visible evidence of it. So yeah, like or post when you go to the gym or like you have your treadmill visible in the house or whatever. That's the
Yeah.
that's the difference there. Or like somebody can see a yoga mat, right? And now they're like, oh,
Yeah.
active, it's good to have a yoga mat in
I
your
should do
study.
that. Oh, I get
Yeah.
it. I love it. Okay. Best place to have a hard conversation.
Oh, someplace new. Great question. So,
Mm.
like, if you think about, I don't know, I've done this test on several people, but if you remember where you had like the talk with whatever parent drew the short straw, I remember it. Like it was like in the Lego room with my mom, right? And so you're what happens again, going back to the spatial networks in our brain, it's like when we learn something, we don't just remember what we learned, but we also encode where we learned it. And so if the where is someplace different, it's going to make it that much more likely that you remember it. It's also like the same principle of like going on a field trip at school, right? It's like you're much more likely to remember that than the 179 days where you were just in the classroom, right?
Yeah.
So if it's a difficult conversation, like, okay, I'm gonna go for a walk with my son and we're gonna have the conversation like out there in the world, and that will make it different.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, finish this sentence. If you want to change your life, start by.
Um, Paying attention to the, I mean, and I would maybe just end paying attention, but paying attention to your surroundings. So I think, part of the issue here, we've been talking about our surroundings because that's like the topic of the conversation, but so much of our life we just move through, the same way we fall into habits with our routines and things, we fall into habits with how we use our surroundings. And I think, there are tons of opportunities available to us, and we don't do an amazing job of like kind of taking advantage of the spaces to which we have access, right? If you think about, okay, again, I'll use myself as an example. Like I get stuck in a rut of doing work like on the same couch in my house for months at a time. And it's just because that's like where I plugged my computer in the last time, right? It's not because that's the best place to do work. So like paying attention to all the different nooks and crannies and where could be a good place to do work could like open up totally new opportunities for me.
I love it. Okay. And like I end every episode, I want to give you the opportunity to leave a final message with the listener. It could be about the book, it could be about anything we talk about, or just anything you feel called to share.
Okay. I would say that, this came out a little, but just the idea that you do have the ability to do these things, right? It can feel like we don't have agency, whether it's in our house or whether it's in our office, but when you feel like you don't have the ability to change things or to affect your surroundings, just look for ways that you do, and I think you'll start to realize that this is something that you can do more of. And once you see that it's like making your life better or that making you feel good, then you can do more and more of it. So just giving you like the power, feeling empowered, hopefully, just to try it.
Beautiful. Well, I love your book. Where can our listener find out more about you online, have you as a speaker, and get the book?
And my parents gave me a good Google name, so it's just leidyklotz.com. I'm the only one, Leidyklotz. And that has information about speaking and the stuff I'm up to. The book you can get anywhere that books are sold.
Beautiful. Thank you, Leidy, so much for your book, for your work, and just everything you're doing in the world to help people. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz.